The first thing is when patients come to me, they come with zero hopes. Multiple studies done in lot of big institutes also have proven a woman who prioritizes her health, her fitness, her diet has a healthier family. That is where fitness comes in. Exercise, any form of exercise, what suits your body, releases a lot of happy hormones.
Does India have a miscarriage problem or a miscarriage silence problem?
I'm going to insist time and again in the entire podcast by saying you cannot generalize a recurrent pregnancy loss patient. She has to be treated as an individual. Her history is going to be her history. My treatment for her is going to be only for her. We cannot generalize the treatment. And yeah, rainbow babies are nothing less than a miracle. Ladies, prioritize yourself. You really need to prioritize yourself. After having kids, I understand we do step back. The priorities start changing. But until and unless we are at the space where we are happy or we are physically fit, things are not going to be very easy.
Welcome to the Doctor Series by Canvas and Couch, a platform dedicated to meaningful conversations with medical professionals. Through this series, we aim to bring reliable and factually accurate insights from the experts themselves. It's such a pleasure to have with us today someone who is working at the intersection of reproductive immunology, fertility, hormonal health, high-risk pregnancy, and personalized women's healthcare. Our guest today on the Doctor Series is Dr. Chaitra S. Nirantara, the Chief Obstetrician and Gynecologist, Reproductive Immunologist, and an alumna of MS Ramaiah Medical College, where she was awarded the Best Outgoing Postgraduate and was also the topper in MS OBG. She has pursued advanced training in high-risk pregnancy from Barcelona, Spain, and over the years has built a practice that brings together reproductive immunology, infertility treatment, PCOS management, counseling, and women's hormonal health across different stages of life. Along with her clinical work, she is also actively involved in research, medical education, training programs, and awareness initiatives, and has received several recognitions, including the Karnataka State Award by Health and Family Welfare Department, the Nobel Laureate Mother Teresa Inspiring Woman of the Year Award, and Asia's Top 100 Influential Women Award. And what I personally found most interesting while speaking with her is her belief that healing is not just physical, but deeply connected to the mind, body, emotional well-being, and lifestyle. Dr. Chaitra, welcome to the Doctor Series by Canvas and Couch. We are so excited to have you with us today and learn so much from you.
Thank you so much, Kavita. I'm really glad to be here today.
Yes. And we are glad you made it. And are you ready for your first question? Yeah. Okay. So, Dr. Chaitra, you began your journey as an OBGYN, but eventually you found yourself drawn towards reproductive immunology, which I feel is relatively niche and still an evolving field. What pulled you towards this space? And when did you realize that immunity and reproductive health were far more interconnected than people believe? And when I first heard this term, I was like, what is this? Even though I had worked in a hospital, we delivered so many babies, I still never had heard of this. So if you could explain what this means to anybody listening today, it would be fantastic.
Lovely. So to start off with, you asked me how I was driven towards this.
Yes.
Immunology has always been something which I was really interested in starting from my post-graduation days. So post-graduation days, I was working in a unit, the second unit, where most of the cases were high-risk pregnancies. So it was always very interesting. I wanted to work in the second unit because there was a lot of high-risk pregnancies in that unit. Getting into the depth of it, what were the causes or why was that particular woman termed as a high-risk pregnancy? Predominantly, most of these women had certain autoimmune disease in the background.
Okay.
So the interest started way back from my post-graduation days, and I must use Dr. Sundari's name and Dr. Asha Swaroop's name here because these are my two mentors who've made me very familiar with this particular case series. So they insisted, you do a lot of studies, we have a set of studies, you need to do studies on that, you need to see what are the cases, what is the outcome, what is the treatment that we have used. And what was the success rate? So by doing so, by compiling information and by statistically analyzing them, I came to know that with appropriate treatment, this high risk pregnancy can be managed with a fruitful outcome.
Right.
So my interest goes back there. And then, luckily, after my post graduation, I was introduced to Dr. Chandrasekhara, who is an immunologist and rheumatologist. And with Sir, started the journey as a reproductive immunologist. It's way too simple. Now it is way too simple.
Okay.
But reproductive immunology still stays as an AI for the treatment or the diagnosis of infertility. The baby carries half of the father's and half of the mother's genetics. So why is it that the body responds when the foreign genetics enters into our system? Okay, very simple, infection. But how is it that a woman carries the baby, which is only carrying 50% of her genetics in her uterus, nourishing it, making it grow, and then having a delivery? So that is where reproductive immunology comes into picture. The immune system modulates itself to harbor, give a very nourishing environment in the uterus, keeps it hidden from the immune system, gives it appropriate growth, time to time, the development, the immune modulation is required for a successful pregnancy outcome.
So it's protection actually for the baby.
More so,
Right.
definitely, yes.
Wow. And I'm sure as we talk to you, we're going to learn a lot more about this. This also brings us to the journey that so many women and couples go through very silently, right? We often hear the term rainbow baby, a baby born after pregnancy loss. But behind that phrase, I have seen usually there's a journey of grief, repeated loss, anxiety, and yes, sometimes hope also. From a doctor's perspective, what is pregnancy after loss journey really like? And do you approach these pregnancies differently, medically, emotionally? I have listened to the feedback given by your patients, and I know you do this very differently. So do share that with us.
So, yes, it's way too different. The first thing is when patients come to me, they come with zero hopes. So, it is not that I am doing anything more than what is actually required. But when they come to me, I know when they are talking to me, I take a very long time when it comes to history collection, and most of my staffs are very unhappy. They're like, you'll have only some 7 patients, that you'll take 2 hours.
Oh gosh.
I need to understand them. It is not easy for a woman to sit opposite to me and go on repeating how many losses she had. Every double line in a uterine pregnancy kit gives her a hope.
Correct.
And the heartbeat is what she wants to see. A loss at any point of time is a loss to the mother. She's going to carry that for the rest of her life. So what made it easy for me to start treating these women is because they come with very less hope. Talking to them, understanding their journey, doing some set of investigations, which is very customized. I'm going to insist time and again in the entire podcast by saying you cannot generalize a recurrent pregnancy loss patient. She has to be treated as an individual. Her history is going to be her history. My treatment for her is going to be only for her. We cannot generalize the treatment. The treatment module has to be confined only to her. So this is where it comes into picture. They come to you and then we collect the history. We do a set of investigations. I'm very happy when I get a very clear answer. So I know what the outcome is going to be. Not every story always ends well. But I feel it is essential for us as doctors, as OBGYNs, to get up and go back again because you are going to make a difference in someone else's life. Most of the patients I treat are someone whom I've started connecting emotionally also. I have learned to adapt myself to this over the past 14 years, but I would say, yes, it is required. This bunch of patients will require me to be available not just as a OBGYN, but also as someone who can listen to them when they really feel it is required. When they need a shoulder, I should be available for them. And that is what makes it a little different here. And yeah, rainbow babies are nothing less than a miracle.
Oh gosh, I can just feel that passion with which you gave this answer, and I really feel that it requires a special kind of person to say what you said. I've met many doctors in my life, and I can say that this is not everybody's cup of tea, and it definitely is yours from what you're saying. So there's so much to learn. So the next question has many parts to it. So please have some patience. So there's lots to learn. So what can I do? So for many couples, the RPL journey eventually leads them toward fertility treatments and IVF. We all know that. But one of the things you had told me when I had spoken to earlier is that not every patient, and you even mentioned it now, needs the same tests, the same protocols, or the same treatment plan. But we know most couples go through repeated IVFs and recurrent pregnancy loss without fully understanding why it failed, right? Why implantation failed. And RPL continues, and they're not understanding the root cause of it. As a reproductive immunologist, what deeper factors play when the immune system interacts with fertility and pregnancy? And what are we sometimes missing before moving through these repeated interventions? If you can shed light on that, because I feel that would help a lot of people listening, because we blindly follow what the doctor says. So tell us.
I personally feel when we talk about recurrent pregnancy loss, we are looking at it as a curse on a woman.
Yeah.
She blames herself. She's very low. It's very difficult to get her back. But as an immunologist, I think the body is trying to tell us something else. It's way of saying something else is happening. We are missing something. And that could be a reason why there is repeated loss. Because when it comes to recurrent pregnancy loss, it need not always be immunological cause. Predominantly, or most of the time, it can be hormonal. We do see luteal phase deficiency, PMOS girls having recurrent pregnancy loss, diabetes, thyroid women having recurrent miscarriages, some women with uterine abnormalities having repeated miscarriages. Then what makes immunology a little bit more difficult to understand is because the tests are not something most of the elite organizations suggest. They don't say, you please go ahead and do all these. No. Very important for me to first understand how many pregnancies she's lost. At how many weeks she lost the pregnancy? Was the heartbeat there? The heartbeat was not there. The baby was growing well up till 5th month, and suddenly the baby had a demise. The baby was growing well, then the growth started declining. Mother started developing hypertension. History. It all comes down to a place where history is the basics for me. That is the one reason I take a lot of time on my history, because every single detail, minute detail she's going to give me is going to help me make one or the other diagnosis. So if she's going to tell me I had 3 miscarriages all before the 3 months, predominantly I will want to look at genetical abnormalities and a condition called APLA, in which the blood flow between the mother and the baby, the vessels which carry it, it is inflamed and it blocks. So we know when the condition is APLA, I am going to be addressing it by preventing the clot. So I will tell her, I will put you on certain medications and injection which prevents the clot. So yes, there is a treatment for that. When it is genetics, then I will have to go a step beyond. Try to find out what is a genetical abnormality. Some women will require IVF. Even in IVF, we do suggest you have to do a genetical evaluation of the embryo before the transplant. The transfer is done. Then comes the second one, where the baby is growing good. And there is suddenly 5 months, the mother comes by saying, we went for a normal anomaly scan. An anomaly scan, they said the baby is swollen and the baby's heart is not functioning very right. That is when again the immunological causes come into play. There are some antibodies in the mother's system which has a tendency to cross the placenta and go and attack the baby which is inside the uterus. And some specific antibodies has very high affinity towards the baby's developing cardia. So these are the histories that we are supposed to catch, and that becomes the base for me to start doing her test. She continues her pregnancy, and in 6 months, we start seeing the growth is slightly coming on the lesser side. Her hands and feet start swelling. So it's already in the back of my head that she is going to develop hypertension. So why? A 24-year-old naturally, she became pregnant. Why should she have this? That is when we go ahead and start evaluating to see if there is a condition like APLA, which is causing these abnormalities. So for me, again, history is very vital. That will decide what investigation has to be done and the treatment module appropriately.
Okay. So I think you answered my next question was, how do you decide what to investigate first? And is there like a thoughtful workup that you usually do for all patients who come in? Like there are certain things that you do as a routine, or is it based on your consultation with the patient?
History. Kavita, I would again, hands down, history. Most of the time, the patients who are referred to the Department of Reproductive Immunology are the ones who are having recurrent pregnancy loss, repeated IVF failures, or implantation failures. So these women would have already been thoroughly worked out for all the other conditions, hormonal, anatomical, everything is worked up there. So when it comes to us, not everyone. Now, I'm very clear, if this is this, I want to do this only first. So definitely not. There is no set of investigations that I would suggest you please do this if you have recurrent pregnancy loss, not like that.
No. And one more thing is like, are there any warning signs that women should not ignore, situations where they should consider getting evaluated earlier than simply waiting like for something to happen? I'm sure there is some warning signs that you tell your patients.
Definitely. With the way things are going right now, the amount of women who are diagnosed with autoimmune conditions is really very high. Now, why this is happening is blamed on various factors, the lifestyle, the dietary habits, the restricted physical activity. But what comes down is that there are some set of signs which we should definitely pick up, especially when a woman comes and she is, say, very simple, if she's with a negative blood group and the husband is positive and she's had miscarriages before, then she has to be given immunization with anti-D. So we prevent the development of complications ahead. If she already knows what it is. If she's facing repeated bleeding in the pregnancy in the first trimester, then she again comes as high risk. So even she has to be evaluated very much early. Family history. If they give you family history of early heart attack or stroke in the first degree relatives, that brings to a point where we will have to evaluate her for hereditary thrombophilias. If she says that in my family there is history of repeated miscarriages or intrauterine death of the baby or abnormal babies developed in the uterus, then it's very much essential that these family histories will guide me as what has to be done. So,
I'm just, while you're talking to me, this is thought, K. When couple is trying to get pregnant and they go to, say, an OBGYN and speaks to them about, usually does the OBGYN take the entire history of the family? It's a must that has to be. So
by your first year of post-graduation, we are very well trained to take appropriate history. Post-graduation was, this 3 years of my life was the most difficult phase. But I think whatever the 3 years has made me is who I am today. If I have to get up and go at whatever time in the night, it is my post-graduation time, which has trained my body. Multiple times my husband tells me that it looks like you OBG people don't want to sleep, or you people are so, we are eccentric.
Yes,
we're very different. I'm sure you'll know.
Yes. My best friends are from your community, so I know. So we never go to a wedding on time. Sometimes we don't go. So I know what it means. But that's also something that I think when you take on this role and choose this field, I think that's what it is. Dedication is something very different. So thank you so much for all that information you gave us on warning signs. I think if people are listening, they can head to the doctor much earlier than, just waiting for. But Dr. Chaitra, one thing I want to ask you, which I feel like is like this burning issue right now, besides menopause, is PCOS or PMOS, like we call it. And so even before women can reach this reproductive age, right, we're already seeing a lot of hormonal and metabolic struggles that these young girls are dealing with. And this has become so commonplace. And I feel still people are not treating it, they're finding the root cause of it. Most of the times I see young girls being blamed for their lifestyle or their eating habits, which could be true. But according to you, what do you think is the real reason we're seeing a rise in PMOS?
Well, first of all, the name change brings along a lot of enlightenment and knowledge to the public. I'm so happy the ovaries are no longer blamed as the culprit. Yes, it is a multi-systemic involvement. It is not just the ovaries. Most of the people who come into the OPD, it's very difficult to convince the grandmothers and the mothers. Yes, like you rightly said, we didn't see this amount of cases in the past. Even when I was doing my post-graduation, the amount or the number of women who were diagnosed with PCOS was really minimal. But over a period of time and over the past decade, it has increased. Definitely, it is to be blamed. The lifestyle, the physical activity, and the diet is to be blamed.
Okay.
Many a times when girls come in their 10, then I tell them it's a stress. During your exams, you are going to be stressed. Your cycles is going to go a little haywire. It is okay. Even manage it. But when it becomes chronic is what is the problem. The name itself, the change of name was actually put forth because it is a metabolic endocrine involvement. So it is not just the OBGYN who's going to be involved in the treatment anymore. We will be looking at active participation from the endocrinologist, the dietitian. There's a lot more. And the name has a lot of impact. It says a story beyond. So tomorrow also, the complications that a woman who's going to be diagnosed with PMOS is going to carry tomorrow. So she is prone to developing type 2 diabetes.
Yes.
Cardiovascular events are much common in her. So this itself says that you have to start acting faster. Now, as to why it is increasing, it is increasing. There's a lot of factors which are blamed around this, but most of it is because of their lifestyle. Even today, the treatment still lies as the first line in any of the treatment, if you see for PCOS or PMOS, will be lifestyle modification. A very active role from the diet and good physical activity has to be there. But along with that, now since we know a little deeper, some people will require additional help for metabolic changes in their system. So this is one thing which will definitely take a very nice turn in the near future, because now we know we are approaching it multidirectionally.
Okay.
So the warning is there. Women are aware about it. And I'd also like to say, most of these girls come to the OPD saying, I know I have the condition. I have polycystic ovaries. Now you treat me for it. Now, how I am going to treat you for it, it depends on your age, what are your symptoms, what are your secondary symptoms because of the condition. All these play a role for me. So once I am sure, like say she is a girl who's attained menarche, and I know her mother comes in by saying she's putting on weight, she doesn't walk, she doesn't go out and play, and this is the reason, and she says my cycles are skipping every month and coming. I would like to first train her body. So I would modify her diet, give her a little bit of supplements if required. When it comes to women who's planning conception, so this is the population which I will actively take over. I will want to know their hormonal status. What is this number of follicles in the ovary? What is her background hormones, or what is the status of her metabolism? So in these women, maybe I will give them supplementations along with certain hormones if required, because I have to start training her body to ovulate regularly.
No.
But this will include all this. The insulin has to be, the fasting insulin, once it's evaluated, that has to be maintained. Her weight has to be maintained, her sugar, thyroid, and the other reproductive hormones also has to be managed appropriately. So early diagnosis, being aware of it with appropriate management, that is the way to go forward with PMOS.
So there are also, I see a lot of people also ignoring it. Like, okay, yeah, I have PMOS, so I have I have a lot of pain. My periods are not regular, and they just continue with life like that. And I feel, I always tell them, what about, do you want to have kids? And when they say yes, I said, this is going to affect that, at least from my little bit of what I know. So you agree that if they don't tackle it when they're younger,
Yes.
it is going to affect, right?
Yes. Yes. Please address it at the right time so we prevent the complications.
Yeah.
And now more so, it's not just about fertility.
Yeah.
It's about the chronic conditions that you may have tomorrow.
That is something new also. I didn't know that. I knew it leads to gestational diabetes. I didn't know about the heart
Condition. Yes,
Yeah.
it does. Chronic inflammation does have an impact on most of the system. So that particular woman will be prone for certain chronic conditions tomorrow in life, and definitely needs to be addressed the sooner.
I'm
the better.
excited for sure. Yeah, great. Also, we are increasingly be realizing that women's health goes far beyond fertility. Today, women are speaking more openly about strength, fitness, nutrition, hormones, aging, and of course, menopause, which is like the buzzword now with PMOS. And at the same time, modern women are also going through stress, lack of sleep, managing home, managing different generations in the house, and not having enough time for themselves. As both a doctor and a woman, what do women need to understand today about nutrition, movement, hormonal health, fitness, and aging well? especially as we move towards 30s, 40s, we've had kids. Now, what next? What do we need to do to take care of our bodies well? And also, if you could shed light on how immunology and menopause, are they connected? Will it help? So, yes, Ram.
So definitely helps. The Whenever you talk about a woman and as she ages, her body changes a lot. For me, if any time a woman asks me, I tell her, please prioritize yourself. Your body is aging, which means that there are so many hormones which is going to start declining. In a woman, starting from her, say, nowadays, because of early menopause, see a lot of changes way earlier. So as a woman ages, the hormone declines. The hormones that we have lived with for a very long time declines. Most of the time, many of my patients come and say, it's like, it's like I've been on something for so long and it's being pulled out of my system. It is that bad. Menopause has to be given that kind of attention. When a girl first attains menarche in our community, in the Indian community, it is celebrated. That girl is nourished. If you go back, way back to our history, beautifully nourished for a good duration of 21 days. Yes, there was a lot of celebration, and the celebration was mainly to give her that kind of comfort, rest, and that is how it went. But as an OBGYN, I would say the same attention has to be given to a lady when she's attaining menopause. When the hormone was speaking, you gave her the importance. When the hormone is exiting from the system also, we need to give them the kind of importance. There's a lot of things which is going to change in a woman with menopause. Starting from her, every single thing. We have a beautiful picture. As OBGYNs, I think most of us will just close our eyes and we remember there is one particular image in our textbook. It says all the changes in menopause. And it doesn't leave any system. Starting from the hair to the nail, it changes. So I'm there. Everything changes. So for me, ladies, prioritize yourself. You really need to prioritize yourself. After having kids, I understand we do step back. The priorities start changing. But until and unless we are at the space where we are happy or we are physically fit, things are not going to be very easy. And this, most of the women will start realizing. So fitness, that is where fitness comes in.
Yeah.
Exercise, any form of exercise, what suits your body, releases a lot of happy hormones. Multiple studies done in a lot of big institutes also have proven a woman who prioritizes her health, her fitness, her diet, has a healthier family.
Absolutely.
And nowadays, I feel women are open for it. And most of them do prioritize their lunchbox also. It is no longer whatever is remaining, putting in their box. No, they do prioritize their lunchbox. So if I am packing a salad, I have a good main course and a dessert, everyone in the family has it. If I am giving importance to color and appearance in my tiffin box, my husband and my kids have it. So prioritize. It is very important. It is not being selfish. Giving time for yourself, once in a while, a spa day is good for you.
Yes.
You need it. You deserve it. And balancing work and home, I think we women are very well adaptive. We change. We can do it. And that's why we are doing it.
Yeah, Pamela, so I wanted to ask you, like, if I talk to my mother about menopause, she says, don't say that word again and again, all the time talking about this. We never had it. We never knew it. It came, it went, and you guys make a big deal about it. So is it we are making a big deal, or is it, again, lifestyle and all this? Because perimenopause is something I didn't go through. I only am going through post-menopause, and that too by accident, I feel. But, I don't know. I mean, is there a reason why we are hearing so much more again about PMOS? Now it's about perimenopause.
First of all, after what happened before, you go back, the amount of responsibility a woman used to carry was a little lesser. Now we have a lot on our head. So the stress by itself is adding on. That's the first thing. And the second thing, the reason why women are prematurely having menopause is one of the conditions which I feel has to be addressed in today's world. Very early. Like as early as 37,
Okay.
38, I'm seeing women with
Yeah.
menopause symptoms, and it is very difficult for them to manage. And now think about it, for the rest of their life, they are going to be devoid of that particular hormone. So
Yeah.
she's going to be exposed to the phase where the postmenopausal phase is a phase where a woman's metabolism slows down. She's more prone for conditions like hypertension, cardiac disorders, or a
So-
lot of changes.
Yeah.
So she has to live that part of her life with these things. Awareness is one thing which women are given these days, and that's why they are aware of these things about menopause. And since we know how to handle it, we are doing it. But way back, I feel the awareness also was a little less. And most of the time, like you said, it was dismissed. It was never a matter of
Yeah.
conversation. Don't talk about periods. Don't talk about menopause. Arey bhai, you have to talk about
Yeah, I know.
We need to educate our girls. But early menopause is something I feel has to be addressed, is going to be something which is very important for women.
Yeah.
A lot of women, the reproductive age group for them is declining, and faster they're going into a phase where the eggs are declining in their body. So that is one thing that definitely
That's
needs to
very-
be addressed. Yes.
I think we can do a whole series on menopause.
Yes.
I'm ready for it. So, at the same time, women today, they are also consuming a lot more health information than ever before. Social media has become a medical channel, really. And it's accessible in so many ways. And it also created a world of generalized advice, is what I feel. Comparison, misinformation, and of course, information overload. And at the same time, doctors like you are, increasingly being scrutinized. Some are being recorded, reviewed, discussed. And I feel sometimes wrongly interpreted online. And that is also damaging to a doctor. With your background in medical ethics and patient care, where do we draw the line between awareness and privacy? And what are the boundaries patients and doctors both need to understand in order to protect the trust and dignity of the doctor-patient relationship, which becomes so important,
Very
right?
true. Very true. With the amount of social media usage these days, I think most of us are aware about the patient-doctor confidentiality. Now I think it has to be both the ways. I am respecting your history. I am going to be by you, but you should also respect my privacy.
Absolutely.
Recording a doctor and talking about them. One wrong thing what goes out is people start taking it as an advice. If I am giving you an advice, the advice is for you.
Exactly.
It's for your body. It's for your age. It's for your blood investigations. I am not going. That same advice will not hold good for another woman, and that is one thing which has to be stopped. If I'm talking to every baby which is delivered, is not a matter of content for a story on Insta. It is definitely not. The privacy has to be managed. At the same time, I would also like to say some important awareness which has to be brought out has to be brought out. And that is one of the major reasons why most of them are aware. I'm so happy when girls come into my OPD and they correct me. Madam, you have written PCOS. Now it is called PMOS. I'm happy that they are getting aware. But awareness needs to be done in the right way. And the patient-doctor confidentiality has to be maintained. The dignity of a doctor has to be preserved. You have to make sure that you're going to respect the person who's going to be sitting there and treating you. And nowadays, with this overusage of social media, most of the doctors are also very worried. There's a lot of medico-legal problems which comes along way. So overall, stop making every single thing appropriate for social media. Not all content is meant for social media. Some of them, yes. Awareness, yes. You want to talk about certain camps or what you've done, your success stories, yes, it is worth being told to. But again, we should know where to draw a line. As professionals, I think we should be very clear about this. I'm okay posting once in a while, talking about some complicated cases I have done. So people are aware that conditions like this can also be addressed.
Correct.
But that should not become a repeated phenomenon. People should not be recorded without consent. So that is where I think it's very essential that we draw a line.
And I feel like nowadays, I think patients have so much accessibility to write about the doctor. One small thing happens and there's a huge, you Google and then you'll see everything ever written. And I think that's so unfair. I think there has to be, is there a law to prevent that from happening? I don't know.
No, not
There isn't, right? Yeah.
I respect it when you are giving me genuine feedbacks. If there has been something which is hurt you, we will sit down and talk about it.
Exactly.
But I am ready to give you the time. make sure you come back and talk to me. Unwantedly flaunting wrong information on a platform which is accessible by all the patients, definitely not right for any doctor.
I agree with you. I have seen the other side because I worked in a hospital and how much it hurt the doctor, the practice. And they're so authentic. All doctors come with this intention to help others. And I understand what you're saying. So, okay, now there's the other end, right? We are dealing with information overload in the urban context, and there's social media everywhere. But the other end, there's a rural woman who still doesn't have access to the basic awareness or support. And in many rural communities, women continue to normalize RPL, painful cycles, infertility, exhaustion, and after some time giving up, right? And also because they don't have the knowledge, the awareness that women in urban areas have. So, well, I know you do a lot of work in rural areas and you have camps. When you interact with women through these outreach programs outside of the urban settings, what concerns you the most, and what do you wish more women understood much earlier in this rural setting, and how can we bring about more awareness there?
Okay, so one thing is very true. Rural women, most of them suffer in silence. They do go through the recurrent pregnancy loss series, and they will, keep it to themselves. And I have seen a set of recently when I did a camp, I have seen in the same village, I have seen 3 women with recurrent miscarriages, and the husband had second marriage because of this. And it was a huge population, but in that particular village, I've seen 3 women like that.
Wow.
And this is where that is where it ends, the knowledge ends, and this is what is required. Women need to be educated. Somewhere down the lane, I feel the health system needs to be made a little more stronger, little more accessible to these women as well. More so for cancer screening, cycle abnormality, and fertility. The accessibility should be improved, is what I feel. Yes, there is. Our healthcare system is really working very well, and the way we work is good. But as an OBGYN, I would definitely want to put in a little more so these women also get access to that. As far as knowledge is concerned, even they also can access. Now, most of the rural women are also very aware of certain conditions. But a condition like recurrent pregnancy loss in a population who is not very educated or not someone who's exposed to these kind of history, it sounds more like a curse. And they do suffer because of this. Not meeting the right doctor, not getting the right diagnosis.
Absolutely.
If it was a recurrent pregnancy loss because of a high DFI in the husband, what is the point in getting married again? It is going to happen to the next one.
Yeah.
So evaluation is important. So accessibility of that particular population is very important. One good thing, Kavita, is a lot of these corporate setup these days are really making an effort.
Okay.
They do take time off. They do go to the peripheries, try to gather people and make them aware of it. We do screening program. I started doing screening program because of my husband. He's very much into, he feels screening is one of the basic things that every human should be eligible for. Even if you don't have fancy hospitals outside in the rural areas, it is essential that you screen them, tell them that this is a problem. So he makes it a point that he does his monthly once camp where you have a half an hour talk. So sometimes it is about for the senior men who's mainly talked about osteoporosis, and for women when I go I talk about menopause and prolapse of the uterus, or if they're having bleeding post menopause, how to encounter with this. So knowledge is important. Educating them really works, and these are the set of population who listen to you very well without questioning back, So they'll listen to you and they come back to you. But fertility is difficult. Fertility for me, it's been a challenge for me to convert rural women for treatment. And the process is still going on, and I hope I find better measures in which I can get them to understand why I am saying it is not the end after 2 or 3 miscarriages. You still have a chance. Now, how I am going to be communicating this to the women or making them understand, it's going to be a little bit of a, it's going to be a story by itself, but I'm sure we'll...
Is it also to convince the family? Because there it's not the woman who's making the decision, it's the man, the family, and also the cost, right? Then they'll think it's probably cheaper to get married again than to go through this. I'm just thinking it's easier.
That's true.
Yeah. So
that is a mindset.
Those are things we have to battle with. Yeah. And I hope more doctors like you go to the outskirts and do this. So Also, this brings me to a very interesting observation, right? That when RPL happens, the focus still tends to fall on the woman and not on the man. Why are male immune factors in RPL still not spoken about enough? Like you just mentioned one, right? And is this genuinely a gap in science, or is it simply easier medically and socially to just blame it on the woman?
Well, Kavita, what I've seen now, very happy to say that men are also stepping up now these days. They do come up and they say, you evaluate even me. I also want to be evaluated. I feel so nice when even he steps up and asks, do I have to be evaluated for anything? There are multiple reasons why a recurrent pregnancy loss can happen, and the male factors like high DFI, DNA fragmentation index, via microdeletion of Y chromosome. There can be certain semen parameters in case of chronic smoking, alcohol, chronic condition, very high blood sugars. So it is important that even a man is addressed. So recurrent pregnancy loss can't entirely be blamed only on a woman, and it is essential for us to evaluate even the man. As far as immunological causes is concerned, certain immune medications does have a role in causing abnormal sperm parameters. So yes, their immunological history, medications that they have been taking is also very important, and certain other tests becomes very vital before we proceed. Just blindly blaming it on the woman and treating her.
So when you do a consultation with somebody who's gone through this, do you insist that the man is also always there in the consultation?
I prefer they are there.
Yeah.
Then if girls come in with their mother or father, the first talk, yes, I don't mind having a conversation with you, understanding where you stand. But even he needs to understand.
Correct.
It is to evaluate both of you as a biological unit.
Yes.
It is not just you. Yes, you are going to harbor the baby. I understand. But half of that is coming from him.
Yes.
So it is very important for me to evaluate both of you as a unit, as a biological unit.
Wonderful. So, I mean, when I can just see you, Liz, with these couples and these families talking and spending hours in your outpatient desk outside saying, oh my God, when is she going to finish? But there must be also some beautiful success stories, right? Because it's not just about the baby, it's about the relationship you have with them, the 9 months that you have nurtured, you've cared. And I was listening to your feedback videos where she said that you prayed for their family. Said every day you said their names in your prayers, and that really touched my heart. And can you share some of your patient stories with us? Because really, these are just beautiful stories.
Bagha, when I started in the Department of Reproductive Immunology, I was a very emotional person. I used to carry back the cases that I used to collect in the hospital, and I have spent sleepless nights. But yeah, women, we adapt. It took a very long time for me, but I started coping up with it because I know that is something which was preventing me from, perhaps in multiple ways, I felt that was restricting me. So I had to cope up with that. And the one way I found to cope up with this is to turn towards spirituality. So that is where it came into my life. Yes, we did celebrate festival, we did pray to God, but for me, that guided me to do better is what I would say. And yes, that is where they become a part of my prayers. A woman with recurrent pregnancy loss is nothing less than a warrior. What they've gone through is extremely difficult for me to express in words. And that is why they play a very important role in my life. Every pregnancy may not be a successful one for me, but that one particular pregnancy which is successful, I know her world is built around that one child. So with the zero hope that she had come, her hope just starts multiplying exponentially as the pregnancy progresses, and so does the pressure which builds on her.
I can imagine.
So, but we try to make it even for both of us. So I do my part, you do your part, and we both do it together. So yes, they are a part of my prayers, and I somehow feel that also has a very important role to play. I'm a person who believes manifestation really has an important role, and I do insist. I hold my patients by their arms and I tell them, manifest it. We are doing all that we can, and this baby is a fighter. Wonderful. Do it. So one success story, I really not able to pick one success story, but heart out to all my patients who've gone through this journey and had a successful pregnancy.
Wonderful. So nice. And hopefully we will also share some of these feedback videos that, it's just lovely. So are you ready for some rapid fire questions. Yeah, it's just been great listening to you. I don't feel like ending, but of course, time is of the essence. So we're going to do something called the pulse check. A quick round of short questions, instinctive answers, no overthinking, under 30 seconds. That's the challenge for you, especially with your passion. So your body rejected the baby. Is this the most harmful phrase in reproductive medicine?
Yes. Please don't blame your body. Overall, it has, like I said, it's a unit. It has to be evaluated overall.
Okay.
Take it as a sign.
Okay, that's it. One blood test every woman with 2 miscarriages should demand from her doctor. What is it?
If it's in the first 3 months, then definitely a genetical evaluation and APLA.
Okay. Does India have a miscarriage problem or a miscarriage silence problem?
It has a miscarriage silence problem and it has to be broken. And now my community, the entire society of obstetrics and gynecologists are at it, and we are making sure that that is going to
The taboo is removed. Okay. IVF or immune workup first? What would you tell?
Immunologist, obviously an immune workup.
Oh gosh, that was not the question that we needed to ask. Can the immune system be trained to accept a pregnancy? And are we already doing this?
Yeah. The immune system can be modulated to receive the pregnancy better.
So interesting. Wow. One word that defines your journey in reproductive immunology.
Purpose.
Beautiful. And passion too. If reproductive immunology had a face, a symbol, an image, what would it be for you?
All those mothers who have delivered the child, all those mothers who are still fighting to deliver the child. For me, every single patient who comes to me is a fighter, and every single of them deserve to be.
You know what the symbol I see is? A pregnant woman. You said warrior. So, holding this sword. Yeah, I just see that. Maybe you should make that something.
Yes.
Go something.
And
So,
good.
I mean, I'm glad we're speaking about, the male species. Now, you spoke to us about that the women get a lot of tests done. Are there any tests that the men also undergo? And what is the latest on that?
So most of the time, the men are very well evaluated. The semen analysis is done, the DFI is done, their genetical evaluation, their hormonal panel, the scan also is performed, the scrotum. But yes, we do a specific test which is called the HLA. HLA are surface antigens, which is very individual for every patient.
Okay.
So what we do is, this is one of the tests which is mainly done before we do an organ transplant.
Oh, wow.
So we take the wife and the husband's blood and we look at the reaction there. So we look for something called the blocking antibodies. So depending on how much of the percentage of blocking antibodies is present, we have a newer therapy which is called the LIT. It's a particular procedure wherein we extract the husband's blood, we get out the lymphocytes from his blood, and we inject it into the woman's body.
Yeah.
By doing so, she will produce certain antibodies which will then protect the baby to continue pregnancy ahead. So yes, LIT is one of the therapy which is extensively followed, but caution has to be done in the appropriate population. This again is not a treatment for all. So please don't go ahead and ask your doctor to do LIT. She will do it if she feels this is appropriate and this will benefit you.
Again, it's case by case, like you said, for everything else. That's fantastic. Also, I had a question for you. When we talk to you, we see a lot of passion and, like you said, purpose. What or who made you the way you are today? Has there been an influence besides your mentors and your teachers and everyone?
And there's a lot of people to thank in that way, starting off from my mom and dad who've seen what is best for me. I always wanted to be a lawyer, so they decided it has to be MBBS for me. Their decision was, I think, the best decision of my life. I fell in love with medicine the very first year of MBBS. The person who kept my passion going through was my husband, supported me through and through. There have been days and nights that we have not seen each other. I come late, he comes early, many days. And then came my 2 daughters, who still respect me so well. Yesterday I had a case. So I was talking and I was telling them the blood has to be ready. This time the OT has to be ready. So my elder daughter got up and she's like, I want to be a doctor. I'm like, why? I'm like, I like the energy. I want to tell people, do all this. And the second half is also, operating and saving them. It's like, but it's nice. It's nice that they are not someone. I carry a lot of guilt, Kavita. I carried a lot of guilt as a mother that I could not give time to my kids. My mother-in-law and my mother stepped up then. They did say, it is okay. This is what you're meant to do. Do it. We are there for them. But my daughters never made me feel like that. So every time I come back, it's Amma, Amma, Amma. My father keeps saying, leave her. She's just to come. Give her time to put her back down. No. But if I have to say, it's my parents, my in-laws, my husband, and definitely my two daughters who've played a very important role in my life, shaping me into whoever I am today, and kept that type A personality like that.
So that's a lovely thing. So there's not just one person, there's a team behind you, like in a hospital, there's a team. So you also have a team that keeps you sane and keeps you inspired and passionate every day. So lovely to know that side of you also. Dr. Chaitra, after listening to you today, I truly feel that while friends and family can support someone going through recurrent pregnancy loss, it is doctors like you who can ignite hope, keep patients positive and future oriented, and help manifest the belief and the possibility of the child they've always been longing for. And for me, perhaps the biggest takeaway from this, and I hope to everybody listening, is that RPL does not always have to mean the end of the road. Sometimes it's a pause, a redirection, or a detour that simply needs deeper understanding, the correct medical support, patience, and most importantly, the right doctor to shine the light. And we at Canvas and Couch are genuinely happy that we got the opportunity to speak to you today on our doctor series, because we believe that you truly are one of those people who is shining the light on reproductive immunology today.